All right, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the Fantasy Bros, and we are here to tell you the Week 3 buys and sells. We're talking trades, so let's get it started. Who's your first buy, Aaron?
So my buy would be pretty much any Broncos player that you can get cheap. Obviously not the nobodies, but Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Russ, if you already have an established quarterback, Javonte Williams. Uh, my reasoning for that is they have the eighth most yards per game in the NFL over the first two games. They're just not scoring. So inside the red zone, Russell Wilson has 18 red zone passing attempts and only one touchdown. They have four touchdowns that have either been negated through penalties or if a receiver caught it and they had 1 foot out of bounds or something. So that's four touchdowns right there. That could be positive regression, but positive regression will come. If you look at the 7 teams ahead of them in yards per game, if you look at their points per games, they are 31, 31, 36, 35.5, 35.5, and 27.5. So you're like, okay, yards equal points, right? Well, the Broncos are all the way down, averaging 16 points per game. That has to change. Either, like, they're going to be the craziest anomaly of yards not equating to points that we've seen, or they're going to end up figuring out their red zone woes and touchdowns are going to start coming.
Yeah, and I think the Broncos are going to get their offense figured out. I mean, they're probably not going to be what we hope they'd be in the preseason leading up to the season, but I mean, there's no way they're going to be this bad all year with Russ at quarterback, and it might take some time for him to figure it out. So I think eventually they'll get the touchdowns will come, and that's a lot of my buy candidates are. They just haven't got touchdowns yet. It's just first 2 games, low sample size, touchdowns are going to come, and so that leads me into my first buy, which is Dallas Goedert. And you may think that's not like really a buy low because he's been doing pretty well, but I think he could go even further. I think he could do better. So far in half PPR, he's got 7.5 and 10.7, and that's solid. But if you could flip somebody like Gerald Everett or Tyler Higbee, and maybe package him with the lowest guy on your bench and get Dallas Goedert, I think he has a lot more upside than those guys. I think the touchdowns are going to be there on a great offense, better than we could have thought, And, I mean, he's getting yards. He's got over 140 yards on the season already. And if you've watched the games, he's just missed out on a lot bigger days than he's ended up with. And if you look, he's got the second highest route participation of all tight ends at 92%. So he's out there running routes pretty much every play. He's running a ton of routes, and the touchdowns are going to be there. So, yeah, Dallas Goedert, bye. Do you agree?
I love that pick. So I've been on Dallas Goedert all draft season.
I'm sold.
Yep, I was on him since the beginning. And so if you look at their actual red zone possessions, Jalen Hurts has 3 rushing touchdowns. In week 1, all 3 of their running backs had rushing touchdowns from inside the 5. Eventually, you're going to see some regression in that department, and I think you will see some of those touchdowns go to Dallas Goedert.
Yep.
So they can't be that successful running the ball all year. Otherwise, they're going to the Super Bowl. If you can run that effectively, you're going.
And they're going to score a lot, and I want a piece of these big offenses.
Yes, they are very high scoring so far. And if you watched Monday's game, he actually had 3 catches negated due to penalties. So if you add those 3 catches, man, he's probably at 15, 16 points without a touchdown, which is the most you can ask for from a tight end. So I 100% back that.
Yep. All right. Who's your next buy?
So my next one is, so in either PPR format, whether it's half or full, I would try to buy Austin Ekeler. Now the reasoning, some people might say, well, he's been disappointing, which he has. I have him on a couple teams, and I haven't been completely happy with the draft capital you spent on him.
Which is why you can buy him right now.
That's exactly why you can buy him right now, because owners aren't getting their full, top 5 draft pick value back. Mm-hmm. But he's averaged over 20 touches a game and doesn't have a single TD yet. Positive regression is going to come. You can't touch the ball 20 times a game and score 0 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to return to the 20 touchdowns he had last year.
No way.
But he should end the season with at least 10. With how many times he's touching the ball, 10 touchdowns should be perfectly doable. And he's on the Chargers, which is a top 5 offense in the league. And with their division and their schedule, they should be in a lot of shootouts. and for his catches, PPR is perfect.
So what do you think about Sony Michel getting some of that goal line work last game?
So that was not good to see, but he was unsuccessful with it. So
It's
that's
true.
the good part. He didn't convert very many short yardage situations, such as third and shorts. He didn't convert. And as far as goal line carries, he also did not convert. So I think, at least if I was the coach, I would look at that and be like, okay, well, we brought this dude in who's not even doing his job. So why not let's just leave our more talented running back on the field? Obviously, I don't know for sure if they're going to do that, but that's what I personally would do.
I don't think they want to give him too much workload, and that's why they're spreading it
Yeah.
around. But when it got to the end of the game and they needed first downs and they were on third down, it was all Austin Ekeler. When they actually needed, the yards, they trust him. So I think they're going to go to him more in the goal line situations. I don't think it's going to be all him, but I don't think that painted a perfect picture of what it's going to be like going forward for Austin Ekeler.
He had 9 catches last
Holy
game.
crap. Yeah,
That is
PPR.
a PPR machine.
Yeah, that's crazy. All right. My next buy, no bias, is Deebo Samuel.
Oh, the 49ers bias.
I might have a Deebo jersey on right now. All right. Look. Last year, Deebo Samuel was the wide receiver 2 in the entire league, right? If Cooper Kupp wasn't breaking records, he probably would have been the wide receiver 1 in a bunch of other years past, right? Like, he was killing it. He had 1,400 yards receiving and another, 500 on the ground or something like that. 400 on the ground. That's what it was. 1,400 and 400. And I know a lot of people are saying that he was too efficient in the touchdowns. But if you watch the games, they're not flukes. Like, he's getting these first downs in these, key situations consistently. So they're going to give him the ball every time they need. They're in the red zone. They need a touchdown. He's getting the ball. They're going to scheme him the ball because they trust him and because he's got a ton of talent. And if you aren't worried about the workload being maybe an injury risk, which I could see that being a risk, that's the only thing. I think there's better days for Deebo. We have Jimmy Garoppolo coming in, which I think is a big boost to him, and he's been a little bit disappointing for the draft capital. So I think people might be a little worried. He scored 11.6 and 12.2 in half PPR so far. So it's a little underwhelming. And I think that, he's fumbled twice. So that's part of that. And both of those games have been in the rain. So that very well could have been part of that fumbling. And I don't think that's going to stay. He doesn't have a huge history of fumbling. So I wouldn't worry about that. And I think there's going to be a lot better days for Deebo.
Yeah, I actually agree with this one. I was a big Deebo non-drafter in the draft season for a lot of reasons you laid out, such as just efficiency-wise, can he keep it up? We weren't sure how many touches he would actually be getting as a running back, etc. With Trey Lance there, we knew the passing wouldn't be as good, and also Trey Lance would be rushing, which would take some of Deebo's work away. But with Jimmy G now the starter, I 100% would go after Deebo Samuel. As of right now, Deebo only has 58 receiving yards, which you're thinking as a receiver through 2 games only has 58 yards. Like, what? But the fact that he can put up 12 and 14 points with only 58 yards between 2 games, and that was in a monsoon game in week 1 where the field was literally underwater, and another heavy rain game in week 2. And now they have a better passer in Jimmy G. I would expect for them to start using him in the pass game a little bit more than 58 yards. Because Jimmy G's a better passer than Trey Lance at this point. It's just a fact. Also, I think it can't be understated. Elijah Mitchell's hurt, and now Tyrion Davis-Price is hurt. So they're down to Jeff Wilson. They just brought up Marlon Mack and Jordan Mason or whatever his first name is.
He's the
undrafted.
Yeah.
So pretty much you're looking at Jeff Wilson and Deebo Samuel. Those are now your team's running backs.
Yeah.
So I think Deebo's a good buy too. Like he stated, only 12 and 14 points. Owners that drafted him in the second round, which was his ADP, they might not be happy with that return, and you might could snag him for a 6th-round player that you draft.
Yeah.
So I agree with that.
All right, who's your next buy?
My buys are kind of a duo. So mine would be Fournette or Joe Mixon. You could target either one of these guys because they are pretty similar situations for me. So both of them are getting massive workloads with 0 touchdowns so far.
No touchdowns.
So Fournette through 2 games has 49 touches, and Joe Mixon has 56 through 2 games. That is so crazy. I'm pretty sure those are the highest 2 touches through week 2. I'm pretty sure. And neither of them have a touchdown. So, I mean, both had 15 to 18 points and half-point PPR in week 1, and following that up in week 2, both had single-digit points. So you're looking at the owners who have these guys who spent either a first or second-round pick on them with coming off of single-digit weeks. They're probably not happy with that. You could sneak in and scoop them up. I mean, in fantasy, workload and opportunity outweighs literally everything else, even talent. And these guys are both talented as well and on what should be good offenses. So the touchdowns will come because it's not a sticky stat. They're random. So you want to target players who are getting crazy workloads on good offenses because they'll give you the highest chance to score those touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. I had Joe Mixon, and I mean, Fournette, they trust Fournette so much, man. Like, they're not passing a lot, and that might change, but if anything, that's going to help them because they haven't had a ton of, opportunities to get touchdowns. If you've watched their games, I mean, they've been super low scoring, defensive battles, and I don't think it's going to be like that all year. I think eventually their offense will get going, and I mean, if he can do this with this little scoring, I mean, imagine put a touchdown or 2 on top of that.
Yeah, he's had 14 points and I want to say like 9 points. And that's no touchdowns. Once they get their receivers back, so Mike Evans is suspended this coming up game. Once he's back, once Godwin's back, once Julio's back, and that offense is clicking and they're scoring a bunch of points, Fournette's going to be crazy.
Yeah, so totally agree with those. The theme here is like guys who aren't getting touchdowns, like it's only been 2 weeks. I don't think you can really extrapolate that much from it. If somebody has 0 touchdowns, but they're getting a ton of work, the touchdowns are going to come. So you just got to trust the process and follow the talent and the people. I mean, the teams are going to give the ball to who's performing the best. So you got to go for those talented players and who are getting a lot of touches, and eventually, the scoring will come. So my last buy is Dalvin Cook. And he just was in a disaster of a Vikings game. And I don't think this is representative of what the Vikings offense is going to be. The Eagles absolutely shut them down. So he just had a 5.6 half-point PPR performance, which is horrible. He had 17 yards on the ground. That is horrible. But if you watch the game, their offense was a disaster. And it was a complete opposite of week 1, And I think they're going to be more high-scoring shootouts throughout the season. Their schedule eases up a good bit as far as the defenses. They've played Green Bay and Philly so far, so that's not an easy schedule, right? And they do play the Bills eventually, but they play, they're gonna the schedule's gonna ease up. So he's also on a crazy 94 target pace, which is better than he's had his entire career. And that's a product possibly of them being down last game, but he's had 5 and 6 in his 2 games. So he's getting 5.5 targets a game. And if he can keep that up, then that's going to be like actual league winning performances if their offense can, rebound a little bit. And I mean, come on, you have to trust Dalvin Cook's talent. I mean, he had 1 bad game and I don't think too much of it. And if somebody's panicking because they drafted Dalvin Cook in the first round and they're not getting any value, then take advantage of it, man, and just, ship A.J. Dillon and one of your bench pieces to get Dalvin Cook. I mean, I would do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, completely agree. That'll probably be Dalvin Cook's worst game of the season, barring an injury and leaving the game early. The Vikings, like you said, are a good offense. They're not in a super tough defensive division. They get the Lions twice. They get the Bears twice. Those are at least 4 games where you feel comfortable with their defensive matchup. Should be easy to get first-round talent, and he's coming off a 5-point week. I could see someone just wanting to get off the bandwagon. So I definitely would agree. I've sent trade offers for him a few times in my leagues, not going to lie.
I think they're about to play the Lions as well. So if you're going to do it, you got to do it now.
There you go.
He's about to blow up.
So I have 2 semi-buys. These aren't guys that are really done anything yet, but if you're sitting there 2-0 in your leagues, you feel comfortable with your depth. You're just killing the game right now. You could try and target both Breece Hall and Travis Etienne. I mean, both are super young guys. I mean, yes, Etienne's rookie year was last year, but he didn't even play a game until last week. So he's only played 2 games in his career. He is a PPR type back. I think if you buy low, so I'm not saying anything crazy. Literally just send a random bench piece that you probably won't use unless an injury occurs for either Breece Hall or Travis Etienne. As we see every single year, typically it takes at least half a season for a rookie running back to really catch pace, unless you're Jonathan Taylor, to really catch pace. And then after that, they typically perform. So I would definitely try to buy low on those 2 guys just for future investment with what they could be.
And they're super high draft capital players, and yep. I mean, these teams are going to want to get these players involved eventually, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. And then my quick buy as well is Chris Olave. He's got less than 10 points in both of his games, but last game against Tampa Bay, possibly the best defense in the NFL right now, up there, right? Probably top 3. He had 13 targets. He had 350 air yards, which is like, I've never even heard of that.
I'm pretty sure the most ever in a game.
I think Winston looked decent against Atlanta, and he looked horrible against Tampa Bay. Yep. It seems like from the first 2 weeks, Tampa Bay is embarrassing the offenses they're playing against. So I don't think that's going to stay, right? I think Winston is okay. But I think there's better days for their offense, and he seems to be targeting Olave a ton. I think he likes Olave. Olave is very talented, and I think that Jarvis Landry is going to slowly fade into the background, and it's going to be him and Michael Thomas. If you can ship a trade where he's the second piece and he's sort of like you got another distraction piece, maybe you got 2 running backs and 2 receivers, and you throw him as one of the receivers, and they don't even notice it. They don't even think much. It's a bench player right now. I think you can steal a late, second half player that can get you on a championship run.
Yep. Another good stat for Olave. In week 1, Jarvis Landry started over him in 2 receiver sets. In week 2, Olave started over Jarvis Landry in 2 receiver sets. So if he's already starting in 2 receiver sets and it's only week 2, I would assume that they're perfectly good with him and that they love him and they want to use him. So,
and I think Jarvis Landry is 31 at this point. I mean, I wouldn't be worrying about him, becoming a big part of this offense. I mean, he's a piece that they're going to use, and he's talented, but they definitely want to look towards the future, and Olave is probably that.
Yep, definitely. All
right, so now on to the sells. Maybe pair these and use some of these sells and try to get some of these buys. So my first sell is Curtis Samuel. I don't know if you have this as one of your sells, but this is the package trade king right now, in my opinion. In every league I have Curtis Samuel, I'm putting one of my pieces and Curtis Samuel to try to upgrade that first piece. I mean, A.J. Dillon and Curtis Samuel for Dalvin Cook, for one of these buy low running backs, Yep. Take one of your pieces and then make an upgrade, because Curtis Samuel so far averaging 17.3 half-point points per game. He's got a touchdown in both games, and that's not sustainable, in my opinion. He's on an offense where there's 3 receivers that Wentz is going to have to get the ball to. And so far he's on a top 5, passing yards pace, and I don't think that's going to stay. He's had a lot of garbage time, and there's going to be some games where he melts down, in my opinion. And yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of bust games in the future for Curtis Samuel. And if you can find somebody who thinks he's going to keep this 15, 17 points per game, then, he's a flashy player right now to put in a package trade.
So this is one that I half agree with.
Okay.
So if you're using it as a trade piece to upgrade a piece you already have, 100% do it. If you can turn Curtis Samuel and A.J. Dillon into Dalvin Cook, or any of the other running backs we laid out previously, 100% do it. But I would not look to just trade them just because you don't think it's sustainable, just to trade. My reasoning is, while 2 games, his touchdown a game pace does not look very good, or sustainable, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Washington has a terrible defense.
True.
Their defense is garbage. They're going to have to throw the ball 40 plus times every single game if they even want to come close to winning. They do have 3 receivers that are all good that they're going to have to share with, so that's a concern. I mean, I wouldn't expect any player to have a touchdown per game. Like, touchdowns are just hard to come by unless you're Cooper Kupp. Then you'll have a touchdown. But, I mean, Curtis Samuel, at least in the past, he's flashed talent many times when he was in Carolina. I mean, I want to say he played like 1 or 2 games between 2 injuries last year, and he did pretty well. So he is a talented player. He's not some kind of person they just grabbed off the street that's doing this.
Right.
So if you can hold him and you can't get anyone to trade with you, I wouldn't freak out. I would just hold him and play him until, ride him till the wheels fall off.
I think he's a decent flex play.
Exactly. High upside flex play.
But because of the point, I just think if you can sell on his performance so far, I don't think he's going to average this many points. And, well, okay, would you trade him for Chris Olave straight up? Because I think if you're a team who's got a good starting lineup and he's like you're not even starting him, I think you should be targeting some of these second half players, J.K. Dobbins, Breece Hall.
Yeah. I mean, if he's like your wide receiver 6 on your bench that you're not ever going to plan on playing, I could see targeting the rookies that could be second half breakout stars, like your Olave, like your Treylon Burks, like your Drake Londons. Garrett Wilson, he just blew up, so I'm not sure if you're going to be able to get him.
Yeah.
Because he just blew up. I definitely could see it. If he's your 6th receiver or so and you don't regularly play him, I don't have a problem with that. But I know in a couple of our leagues, we have like 2 wide receiver, 3 flex leagues, or 2 flex leagues that we can play up to 4 or 5 receivers.
Mm-hmm.
And I know if I had Curtis Samuel, he would be in my roster, in my lineup in that league. But if you only have the traditional like 2 wide receiver and 1 flex, and Curtis Samuel's just chilling on your bench, I 100% would trade him for a rookie that could be a second half breakout.
General trade advice: if you're playing in these leagues with 1 flex and 2 receivers, you need to be doing 2-for-1 trades because you can't start that many players. Like, package your players and get an upgrade. You want the best piece in a trade because, look, I mean, if 3 receivers, 2 running backs, that's not a lot of players. There's going to be plenty of value on the waiver throughout the year, and you just want to upgrade, and it'll make space for the waiver. So, I would be sending package trades with him in it personally. But if you're in one of these leagues where you would be flexing him, then I wouldn't stress about getting him off your roster.
Yep, exactly. So for my first sell, it's probably a very obvious one to most people, but it's Antonio Gibson. So, I mean, the biggest red flag is Robinson. So the running back that got shot, Brian Robinson, he has been practicing. He started off smallly practicing last week. This week he's amping it up to like full running back drills and stuff. So I believe they said his target return date is either week 4 or 5. I'm not 100% sure if they put him on IR or not. I don't remember. But regardless, he's targeting a week 4 to 5-ish return. I believe once he returns, it's going to be very hard to trust anybody in this backfield. I mean, between J.D. McKissick taking passing work, Antonio Gibson trying to do running downs, and Brian Robinson trying to do running downs, I mean, this isn't an offense that I want to trust with 1 of 3 running back committees. Like, it's just not what I want.
He played Detroit last week and got bailed out by a touchdown.
Yeah, he had a pretty high-scoring game for where you drafted him. I think he was by the end of it, he was ADP round 7 or 8 running back. I mean, you got him. He scored very well week 1. If you could sell him off that potential or off that score, I would. I mean, at this point, I would, assuming you have depth, because he was drafted very late, so you should have at least 2, maybe 3 running backs that you drafted ahead of him. I would target maybe the rookie guys. If you could target someone that's maybe struggling, like a DK Metcalf, who's had a bad couple weeks. If you could target the Broncos guys, maybe you could pull Courtland Sutton or a Jerry Jeudy since he had an injury last week. Maybe a Marquise Brown, who's had 14 and 12 half PPR points per game. So if you could target somewhere around that range that you would start every week, I would.
Package him, target Javonte, like we just talked about earlier.
Yep. If you have like Curtis Samuel, and Antonio Gibson for Javonte Williams or someone of that caliber, I would certainly do.
I would even trade him straight up for James Robinson. I don't know if that's possible, but
yeah, James Robinson has been killing it.
Yeah, he's going to be in a three-headed monster very soon, so his usage is probably running up. All right, so I have a controversial sell. I mean, maybe it is. I don't know. It's Nick Chubb.
I thought about that too.
I mean, look, he is the number one running back on the season so far. He has averaged 22.8 half-point PPR points per game. That is by far his most that he's ever had. He has been a 15-point per game guy his entire career, and I don't see it being any different. So, going forward, expect about 15 points per game. He's not going to be averaging this 23 points a game. Every year he has these 30 points. He just had a 3-touchdown game, 31-point performance. And look, we have seen this every single year. Just because he has a hot start doesn't mean it's going to continue. It's going to be more of the same. So, go back, look at his previous seasons, what he's done, and I would expect exactly that. Now, I could see him going on a, crazy fantasy playoffs run. So if you want to hold him for that, I totally get it. But I think you can capitalize and actually get like a huge receiver upgrade right now. If you make a lateral move with Nick Chubb for one of these top running backs, Aaron Jones, Dalvin Cook, somebody like that, and upgrade one of your receivers, I think I would make that deal right now.
Yeah, I contemplated putting Nick Chubb on my list too, for pretty much the same reasons you laid out. He typically starts off strong. He does have these 30-point games. If you're talking about pure runners, I think Nick Chubb might be the best in the league as a pure running back. But in any form of PPR, he just does not get catches at all. That's why they have Kareem Hunt there. He got 3 touchdowns this week, which is good. Cannot rely on that every week. I mean, you can't even rely on 1 touchdown. I mean, his quarterback right now is Jacoby Brissett. So,
yeah, and they've played the Jets and the Panthers so far.
Bingo. 2 trash defenses. So if you could sell high, and I mean, his division's pretty tough too. I mean, Baltimore's run defense is pretty tough. Then you got the Steelers, and then you got the Bengals. Like, that's 6 games right there of defenses that you're probably not super happy about facing. So, and I mean, if you're killing it right now and you're 2-0, I could see just holding out until Deshaun Watson comes back for the fantasy playoff run. I get that. But if you could sell Nick Chubb right now for a Saquon Barkley, who had a disappointing week, or package Chubb and a receiver for like Jonathan Taylor, who had a really disappointing week, I definitely would.
McCaffrey in any PPR format, I would target those guys. Yeah. I mean, he's going to have those boom games, so if you want to just keep that on your roster and take the boom games, I totally get it. But there's going to be Kareem Hunt weeks. There's going to be weeks where their offense is disastrous. So, I mean, Carolina and the Jets, I don't see that being, what's going to be going forward for Nick Chubb. I'm always going to be good games, but if you can sell somebody on the 20-plus points per game, I would cash in.
Definitely. So I also have a controversial sell as well. Mine would be Derrick Henry.
Sell low?
I mean, you might not be selling low right now. I think there's still some Derrick Henry believers out there. He was still a first round, most leagues top 5 to 7 draft pick. I think you could cash in on at least some of that perceived value and some of the name value. So I know it seems bad, and this one could come back and bite me in the butt. Definitely could. But if you could get anywhere of the first or second round guys that were drafted in those ADPs, I certainly would. So their O-line already took a step back from last year to this year. They lost a couple players of free agency. And then if you watched Monday night's game, they just lost their left tackle Taylor Lewan, who is likely out for the season. So that's already 3 offensive linemen down from last year to this year, which is not good. Their defense has already lost Harold Landry, which is a stud linebacker. He's done for the year with a torn ACL. Bud Dupree did get injured in yesterday's game or Monday's game. Have not heard an update on what that injury is yet. Don't know how serious it is. Their secondary is very young, so they're inexperienced. They are learning on the fly basically at that position other than Kevin Byard, who is a top safety, but you can't do it by yourself. So I would expect them to at least in a lot of their matchups to be chasing points, which does not bode well for Derrick Henry. Right now through 2 games, his YP yards per carry is 3.1, which is not great, especially considering 2 years ago when he was a superstar, it was around 5 to 5.5 to 5.5. Last year on his crazy start, he was around the 4.7 range. So even then, he was still very efficient. Whereas now through these 2 games, it's 3.1 is basically trash, to be honest with you. So they'll be playing from behind. Line isn't great. I mean, week 1 against the Giants, Derrick Henry got 25, I believe it was like 21 carries, and he only had 80 yards and no touchdown. If you're in a PPR league and you're getting 0 catches and you're only getting 80 yards, that's killing you, man.
Yeah.
Like, that's 8 points. You can't have that from your first round pick, or it's going to kill you all year.
If he didn't get a touchdown last game, he would have had 2.5 fantasy points. That is actively, as your first round pick, that is giving you losses if you're having that low of a performance in your running back 1 slot. So if this continues, then you need to move on while there's still value, because it could stay the same. There's going to be good games. I mean, obviously it's Derrick Henry, but if he's, every other week putting up performances like this, you are going to be struggling. Going into the season, there was optimism based off of last year. He averaged about 3 targets per game, that he would be more involved in the passing game. And so far, he is not involved at all in the passing game. He has 1 target on the season and 0 catches. So this is not looking good for any type of PPR format or any format at all, because that receiving work was going to give him a higher floor, and his floor is non-existent right now.
And looking at his schedule with his division, I mean, you look at 4 games between the Texans and the Jaguars. So that's probably 4 games that he's going to have that are very good. But, I mean, they're going to be so sporadic, and I do believe he's going to be a touchdown dependent. And in PPR formats, you can do better than just a touchdown dependent running back.
So
first round pick.
Don't panic, though, and sell him for nothing. You need to get
Definitely.
value.
Definitely.
I know it's scary and it could be disastrous, but don't trade a really talented player like this for nothing. So, some examples. Would you trade Derrick Henry straight up for Dalvin Cook?
I would.
Okay, what about Fournette?
That one's getting closer to where I wouldn't. I probably wouldn't right now, but I could definitely see the future for Fournette being better than the future for Derrick Henry.
I would go for Fournette.
Just based on potential offense. So you're looking right now, and Tampa Bay's offense is probably the worst it's going to be all year due to all their receivers being out. You look at the Titans, and there's really not a lot to be excited about. I mean, when Treylon Burks gets more involved, that should take him a little bit higher. But, I mean, they're pretty much at their ceiling right now. And I would rather have a running back that's in a better offense, and Fournette gets more passing down work. So, in PPR leagues, I would take that, safer floor.
And you could package him with, just a bench player for one of these running backs that we trust more. So you mentioned Ekeler as a buy. If you could package him in a PPR format with somebody on your bench for Ekeler or for Joe Mixon, I would do that personally.
Or Saquon Barkley, who just had 5 points. You could probably get him.
You want to get talented players. So we're talking top 10, we're only mentioning top 10, top 12 running backs here. I would definitely shoot for one of those.
Or a receiver.
Right. Or if you have a lot of running back depth, maybe you hit late on James Robinson or something like that, and you can spare, then go for this top receiver talent.
Definitely don't panic sell. But if you can get proper value, I would look to move on.
There's always somebody that loves Derrick Henry in your league. I mean, he's been so good for so many years that, I mean, everybody knows how good Derrick Henry is. So he's a big name. You can get a lot of value for him. And then this is my last sell, or maybe I have one more. Man, this is another. Don't give him up for nothing. Obviously, this guy is worth a lot right now, but I would capitalize on Jaylen Waddle. And look, Jaylen, I mean, that offense is crazy. I get it, but he's got 3 touchdowns in 2 games. That's not going to stay. There's going to be a lot of scoring opportunities on this offense, yes. So he has a lot of upside. But if you can manage to get like a top 5, top 10 receiver for him, I think he's more of a wide receiver 2, maybe high-end wide receiver 2 going forward. I think there's going to be – look, last game I think is an anomaly. There's not going to be more 456 touchdown games. You know, him and Tyreek Hill have both had amazing games, and I think going forward it's going to be more of an alternate. You know, they're alternating who's got the big games, and I think it's going to lean in Tyreek Hill's favor, personally. Look, Jaylen Waddle's a great player, but I think he's overperforming a lot right now. He has had in half PPR 16 and 34.6 points. I mean, you can get the moon for him right now, and I would. I would trade him straight up for a top 10 receiver if you can get him. I mean, I would personally target Devontae Adams or Jamar Chase. I would go for those players that didn't have a good week this week. And if you can, I mean, either straight up or just throw in some nobody as a 2-for-1, I would definitely take those players' talent over Jaylen Waddle.
I don't hate it. You look where you drafted Jaylen Waddle this year, probably 4th or 5th round, depending on your league size. And when you drafted, he's way overproducing what you drafted him to be right now. And I think with how crazy his last game was, everybody, at least on Twitter, is still talking about the Ravens game. So I think his trade value right now is probably the highest it'll be all year. Now, look, we could both be wrong, but I do think projecting 450 and 6 touchdowns every week is a little outlandish and not believable. Yeah. We could also be wrong, and maybe Mike McDaniels is just the smartest offensive mind ever, and he does average a touchdown a game. Totally possible. But if you could turn Waddle and a bench player into Devontae Adams, or like he said, Jamar Chase, or if you could actually trade him for T. Higgins and then get something back in return, like, I would definitely explore options on that.
I would look at Deebo Samuel or Michael Pittman. I think those are more comparable players. So, you know, maybe you get another piece in that deal, but I mean, I
mean, shoot for the moon. Like you said, don't just trade them for nothing. Know what you have, but also if you can look to upgrade, I would, for sure. All right. So my last sell would be CEH, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So I know what you're thinking. He's had 2 back-to-back pretty good games, at least for where you drafted him. He was a later round pick, 7th to 9th roundish, I believe, was his ADP. But his usage is just insanely low. He's averaged 11 opportunities per game between carries and targets and catches. 11 opportunities per game through 2 weeks is not good. So I know in week 1 he had 2 touchdowns against the Cardinals, which is not impressive at all because the Cardinals defense is absolute trash. At least it was that game. And the first 3 quarters of the Raiders game. So maybe they turned around, maybe they didn't, I don't know. But 2 touchdowns is kind of fluky for a player that generally in his career doesn't have a lot of touchdowns, especially in the red zone. Also, if you look at his yards per carry and how many yards he has per catch in his first 2 weeks, he's had a lot of explosive runs, which for him is generally uncharacteristic because in his career he doesn't generally produce those 30 and 40-yard plays, and I think he has 2 or 3 of them through 2 weeks, which generally is not his MO. So if you could get any type of value that was drafted ahead of him, I would. I mean, yes, he's in probably the best or top 5 offense in the league. Yes, there will be shootouts, but I mean, averaging 11 touches per game is not going to get it done. If you're banking on him to be hyper efficient on 11 touches per game. I just think that's a failing formula, and you could get like a player that's more consistent with a higher workload, in my opinion.
I would be targeting. I agree with you, and I would be targeting players. If you want to do a trade straight up, I would be targeting players like A.J. Dillon, Javonte Williams, even David Montgomery, who I think is going to be a decent player this year. And those guys are going to get way bigger workloads than Clyde, right?
Yep.
So I think they're going to be more consistent. If you need an RB, if he's your RB2 right now and you want more consistency, then I would target one of those guys. Or, as always, package one of these guys for one of these top 12 running backs. Always go for the best player in the trade. And yeah.
If you could 2 for 1, I'd do it. I love 2 for 1s.
All right. Is that your last sell?
Yep. That's my last one.
All right. Well, thank y'all for tuning in to the Fantasy Bros. Go do it. This is our thing.
What's our thing?
Oh, shoot. You can't see me.
I cannot see you at all.
All right. Well, I'll tell you later. Anyways, okay. Let me redo that. Thank you for tuning into the Fantasy Bros. This has been Tyler and
Aaron.
And we're out. See ya.